Hello and welcome to Hindsighting, where we discuss all the movies to win the Best Picture Oscar and try to figure out if this picture truly is the best or is time rendered a different verdict. I'm Edward Clow, and my guest today is a screenwriter, a USC film grad, and has seen planes, trains, and automobiles way more than is healthy. Jon Steinfield, thank you for joining me, Hindsighting.
Thanks for having me, Ed.
Today we're hindsighting the Best Picture of 2001, A Beautiful Mind. From 8 nominations, it also won Oscars for Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Supporting Actress. It was nominated against Gosford Park, In the Bedroom, Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, and Moulin Rouge. So, Jon, before we get to A Beautiful Mind proper, you were the one, I mentioned last week that someone gave me the very good advice to start in the year 2000. That was you. I don't even know if you remember this. It was quite a long time ago. I asked Joe Russo this last week, and I'm going to be asking all my guests, so I'll throw it to you. I think the 2000s was the worst decade for movies in my lifetime. Not for all time. I would have said for all time. I went into this in mass last week, but I just think it's sort of looking back. I didn't feel this way during the 2000s, but as the decade was winding down, I had a really hard time coming up with what the best movies of the decade were. Not to say that there weren't any good ones, and I think we'll discuss some good ones on this show, maybe even in this episode. But I wanted to ask you, what is your opinion of the movies of the 2000s? Do you think it was a good decade, weak decade? You think I'm an old man shouting at a cloud? What do you think?
Screaming in traffic. No, I think, look, when you compare it to the decade that came before it, the 90s was such a giant time, transformative time in movies, the rise of Tarantino and Fincher, and really kind of informed a lot of the movies that I loved and the taste that I love. So, it's tough to compare it, I would say, but I wouldn't say off the bat that the 2000s was a horrible decade. I think, in fact, I said to you just before we started recording that, this year actually had a bunch of movies that I thought held up pretty well and I enjoyed revisiting, and I think as you get on in the decade, you'll see different kinds of movies. I think what was interesting about this podcast we just spoke about, Mission Accomplished, shout out to Brian Raftery, awesome podcast. It takes a while for movies to respond to what's happening. Also, I think in the culture or the world at large. So you don't have a lot of movies talking about like the Iraq War or even the war on terror until later on. In terms of purely entertaining movies, it gave us the rise of Will Ferrell. It gave us the rise of Apatow, which is in the comedy space. So, I'd have to think deeper about it, but it certainly wasn't a dark ages for me at all.
Okay. All right. Do you feel, you seem to think it was the nadir of popular culture, huh? It's not so much like I'm trying to convince all you guys that I'm right. I'm just kind of want to interrogate it. So I'm glad that you're pushing back on it because Joe Russo pushed back on it also. Could be, I don't know. It's just that the 2000s were so much weaker than the 1990s, and I think so much weaker than the 2010s. We're halfway through this decade. This decade, the jury's still out. 1, because we're only halfway through it. 2, I've just seen fewer things this decade. I have a lot of gaps. There's a reason we're not covering like Nomadland through Anora. Yeah. I've seen those movies, most of them, but I haven't hit the books on everything that was out in those years. Also, they're very recent. I just think that'd be a very interesting podcast. I just wanted to sort of interrogate it because I'd love to finish this sort of mini project within this major project and see, maybe the 2000s were better than I thought, And I also, even though I didn't have kids back then and can go to the movies more, I went to the movies weekly, sometimes a few times a week. I still hadn't seen everything. There's still things, everybody has gaps. Yeah. There are classic movies I haven't seen. We're talking about 97 Best Picture winners. I've seen 65 of them.
It's pretty solid.
It's a solid number, but there's a lot I haven't seen. And in a few of them are like really, really big movies that I just haven't seen. So.
Yeah, I don't know. I think when you look at it, I remember thinking about this recently that, 2007, for example, was like a fucking banger of a year.
I agree completely.
2007 had Michael Clayton, There Will Be Blood, No Country, and these are movies that I think are, when people bemoan, they don't make adult dramas anymore. They don't make dramas like the 70s that they used to,
right.
Kind of the paranoid, movies that, like Clued or Parallax View, or just kind of more prestige, intelligent adult dramas. I'd look to Clayton, I'd look to even something like No Country. So I think 2007 is a year that jumps out. I think it was an apex time in comedy. The Hangover 2, which was like firing and all. Not The Hangover 2, The Hangover as well.
Okay.
The Hangover 2 is, different conversation.
Well, I think The Hangover 2, even if you're a fan of it, isn't in this decade anyway.
It's not. Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. I think when I think of some of my favorite movies of this century, they maybe more skew comedy, but even not, they kind of fall in this decade. So I think maybe you're being a little harsh on it.
Yeah, and I wondered that too. I mean, yeah, it's not, again, I'm not trying to convince people. I think it's an interesting sort of, I don't know what the future of this show is in terms of like after I finish this series, if I'm going to go by decades, but I don't think I would be able to throw this. I mean, another great reason why it was such a great idea of yours to start here is because these movies are long enough ago that we have some perspective to hindsight.
Sure.
But, they're not so old. You and I are different ages, but depending on our ages, most of my guests either saw these in the theater or saw these in video, saw them pretty contemporaneously. Even if you didn't see these movies in the theater, you were around when they came out. And, I didn't see today's movies in the theater, but what I'm saying,
okay.
But I did see it soon after. We'll get to that in a second. So it's just a really good place to start. And it's also 2025 and we're talking about the early 2000s. So we're 25 years, 24 years into the case of today's movie. So yeah, it's just kind of an interesting, I'm very curious. As just an informal poll. So yeah, it's just something I kind of wanted to throw out there. But let's move on to A Beautiful Mind.
Yeah.
So I'm going to throw some stats and some stuff I thought was really interesting. So our first stat here's a dubious distinction. For this film, Jennifer Connelly became the 8th white actor to win an Academy Award for playing a non-white character.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't even know her character was non-white, but here are her predecessors.
Nor I. Okay.
I don't think I knew she was not white, but her predecessors are Louise Rainier for a movie called The Good Earth in 1937.
Pearl Buck.
What's that?
Shout out Pearl Buck. It's based on a novel by Pearl Buck that we read in high school.
Oh, you know more about it than I do.
Not something still on our bookshelves.
Okay. All right. I didn't know this movie or this book, so there you go. These other movies I've heard of, and I've seen a few of them. After that is Yul Brynner in The King and I, Hugh Griffith for Ben-Hur, George Chakiris, West Side Story, Patricia Neal for HUD, another one, didn't know she wasn't white.
Yeah.
Linda Hunt, The Year of Living Dangerously, and William Hurt, Kiss of the Spider Woman.
There definitely was, in doing some of the research and kind of revisiting the movie in the Oscar campaign, and we can get to that maybe later on. But there was some backlash against the movie, but that's not what I saw backlash about at all. I think today that would probably ruffle way more feathers than it did back then.
110%.
But interesting. In the pushback against the movie, which ultimately didn't work, the movie won Best Picture.
Right.
That was not kind of part of it.
Yeah. Some more stats. Russell Crowe was the second of only 2 actors to play the lead in consecutive Best Picture winners. So he was in Gladiator and was the lead in that, which won the previous year. We covered that last week.
Almost won back-to-back for the first time since.
It would have been Tom Hanks if he had won back-to-back.
Yeah, I don't mean to grill the host. But
No. I'm glad I knew it. The first time was Clark Gable. He was in It Happened One Night and Mutiny on the Bounty. But an interesting thing, and there'll be an emerging narrative here, Guy Pearce also appeared in back-to-back Best Picture winners in a supporting role. He had a small role in The Hurt Locker and a supporting role in The King's Speech. So little Bud White, Ed Exley narrative, which might come up again. Lengthwise, at 2 hours and 15 minutes, number 63 if you count the movie Sunrise, which we'll litigate in a later episode. It is number 14 on the box office list of Best Pictures with a worldwide gross of $317 million. So let's get into it.
Yeah.
What, if any, was your relationship to this movie before you watched it for this episode? Had you seen it? Do you remember when you first saw it?
Yeah, totally. I saw this in theaters, I guess, unlike you, right? You said you had not?
I had not. We'll get to that in a second.
Okay, yeah. I saw it in the theaters because I was on a big Russell Crowe kick. I'd seen Gladiator was, probably at this time was my favorite movie. I loved Gladiator. So then I went back, and that's probably the first thing I'd seen him in because I was not too old. I was probably 14 at the time in 2000. So then I went back and revisited him in LA Confidential and The Insider. And he, honestly, at this point was my favorite actor, I would say, just from those 3 movies. I was like, this guy's amazing. Look at him playing the guy in The Insider and then going to, into Gladiator, which just kind of rocked my world. So I saw it in the theater. Probably saw it opening weekend. I was really into tracking like the Oscar stuff, and this was getting big buzz at the time for sure. I honestly don't remember what I thought of it as a young person, other than the fact that I thought it was good and it really confused me, by the end. But I was younger because the whole notion of dealing with schizophrenia and the fact that the Paul Bellamy character is not real was kind of a little bit lost on young me. Frankly, I hadn't revisited the movie since up till prepping for the episode, honestly. So it was not something that loomed large in my kind of consciousness at all.
Yeah, this is the first time I've seen it since in over 23 years. I saw it in early, maybe spring of 2002. I didn't see it in the theater. I don't think I avoided it. It just kind of fell through the cracks. I remember, it's not such a great story, but I'll be brief. I remember my friend Rachel had gotten the DVD, and it was only DVD back then, and had invited me and maybe some friends over to watch it. And I just distinctly remember sitting in her apartment in West Hollywood and watching it, and hadn't really thought about it since, other than as a trivia point of, that won Best Picture in 2001. I had a similar experience with Gladiator last week in that I hadn't seen that movie. I saw it in the theater, and then I saw it on video, but it had been 25 years almost since I'd seen it. So like beat for beat, scene for scene, I was just surprised by a lot of stuff because I didn't remember this is said here and this is said, and so it was almost a fresh experience. I mean, I think what's going to be interesting about, for me, and I hopefully my guest hosts like yourself, and hopefully people who are listening and watching, maybe watching along with us, is that, the movies that I haven't seen in a long time, it's kind of like hearing a song you haven't heard in a long time. And it was just like, oh man, I remember this, but music's obviously way more portable and movies have become more portable. But this was definitely, scene to scene. I didn't remember what was going to happen, even though I remembered generally how the story went. So it was as close as I could come to like seeing it fresh. It's just having not seen it for 23 plus years.
Yeah. And thinking back to what I thought about it as a kid, again, 14-year-old, the Russell Crowe of it really stood out to me. Yeah. Really stood out. I remember thinking at the time, and I feel differently now, and we'll get into that when we get there. But at the time, I was really pulling for him to win back to back, because I thought, I was like, that's an incredible performance. And we don't have to dwell too much on what 14-year-old me thought, because
it's interesting to me though. No, I mean,
that's what stood out. I was like, wow, that's an incredible performance, up there with like a Rain Man to me at the time. A transformative performance when someone takes on something that is very different from themselves. How did
it play for you? Sorry, how does the performance play for you now at your adult age?
I mean, I don't think he deserved to win now. He obviously didn't win, but I thought he was actually like tremendous. I did too. Going back to back with Maximus, I think is pretty awesome.
I think the mark of a good actor is just to look at 2, 3, 4 roles of theirs and see how different they are. And I think Russell Crowe, if you look at LA Confidential, The Insider, Gladiator, and A Beautiful Mind, which are almost consecutive, I think those are 4 different performances. Total chameleon for the superficial reasons of gaining weight and all that nonsense. But
no, I think, Maximus, he plays a conqueror of the world, basically, and in this one, which is a year later, there are times when he's just, he's shriveling up. He's clearly losing his mind. He's writhing on the floor. Look, maybe it's not the most nuanced performance of all time, but I thought he crushed it.
No, I thought he was tremendous. And it was interesting just watching it. There was just things, this is not one I won't say I had unfond memories of it, but this wasn't one I was like super excited to revisit. But in revisiting it, I got kind of excited. Yeah. And I had a similar feeling about Gladiator last week too, is that like, it was like, I was excited to watch Gladiator because I meant I was finally starting this podcast. But, I was sort of like, okay, like this, some of these movies, revisiting them or watching them for the first time might feel like a chore. That's my journey. I did this to myself, but at least so far, watching Beautiful Mind, we'll get into it in a second. Like it didn't. I was surprised by a lot of stuff. Again, I knew where the story was going. I knew sort of what was real and what wasn't, but sort of the mechanics of what was going on scene for scene were interesting. So I'll throw a mini question at you. This is specific to the movie, so no one else is going to get this question. So there's a scene in this really early on, I wrote this down, where Russell Crowe is writing, I guess, equations on a window.
Good Will Hunting style.
Well, okay, so is that the first time that this happened in a movie, Good Will Hunting?
Good Will Hunting, it was a mirror in his bathroom.
It was a mirror in his bathroom. I'm just wondering, because there's a line a couple seconds later where Paul Bettany says, you've invented window art. Right. And I wrote that down and I'm like, is this the first time we're seeing this in a movie? I don't expect you to have this stat handy.
That's a great call. That's a great call. I mean, I think Good Will Hunting and Good Will Hunting looms, I think, larger in the culture than does Beautiful
So
Mind.
Good Will Hunting, Matt Damon writes it on a mirror,
mirror. I remember because you can see his reflection in the mirror.
Okay, so that probably... They're probably okay.
And that was, and he kind of wipes it off with a rag before he's going out. I mean, for sure.
That's a good call. I'd forgotten Good Will Hunting would have been 4 years before this. And it was also a big hit and an Oscar winner, not Best Picture, but so Good Will Hunting was the first. What are let's talk about the movie. What were your thoughts?
Like you, I think I thought about it and I was like, you know what? Am I thrilled to fire up Beautiful Mind again after 25 years?
You kind of drew. I just asked you. John was a good sport. I just said, hey, do you want to do a Beautiful Mind as opposed to offering? You weren't offered the choice that some of my guests coming up were.
But you know what? Again, I thought Russell Crowe killed it. And one thing to add about Crowe that I think is interesting is when you compare him, I think at that point, hard to argue, 2000 and 2001, he's maybe the biggest movie star in the world. I mean, there's always your Tom Cruise, Tom Hanks, but I mean, he just won the Oscar, and as you said, one of the biggest grossing movies of the year, of all time to win Best Picture, and then he goes in this kind of transformative performance, and comes very close to winning back-to-back Best Picture, Best Actor Oscars.
Yeah,
but I think you don't see our biggest movie stars in the world do what he did anymore. Really, kind of throw them into a character that's at times pathetic and is weak and is really not strong. You don't see Clooney or Pitt do that, honestly. You don't even see DiCaprio do that.
DiCaprio, I think, is the only one who might. It's interesting because it's I'm of two minds about it. I think you're right. There's a lack of vanity in what he does, but a cynical person could say, well, is it clamoring for an award or is it vain that way? Hard to know. I don't know.
It's a good performance in a good movie, so people want to be like, oh God, he's awards baiting, I guess. But,
I'm not suggesting that he is. I mean, schizophrenia is just, I'm not an expert, but it is just such a horrifyingly awful condition.
It doesn't seem like a picnic.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like a picnic, but also to depict it, without, being disrespectful. And I don't have any direct experience with it, but I do feel like, the movie for the most part has a pretty deft hand at least depicting this. And it's also, I think, when I saw this for the first time, I was, what would I have been? I would have been 23 years old. Now I'm 47 and I've got 2 kids and a wife. So I think that's also worth mentioning that the lens with which I watch this movie, it's different. Sure. It's different for Gladiator too, but Gladiator is not a movie I can really relate to, which is not a strike against it, but Gladiator is just such an extreme.
You can't relate to Slaying a Lion?
No, but it's not, I would think most people can't. But what I'm saying is this is a movie, this is a drama, dealing with relationships, and, I'm in a different stage of my life, as are you. You have kids too, of course. And, so I think that's also my take on this movie. Certain things landed for me in a way that they wouldn't have as a 23-year-old kid, basically.
Yeah. I mean, perspective on a movie changes over time, and that's why it's so fun to rewatch it, especially with such a big gap between your first watch and a different. I mean, I'm a, cosmically different person, as I'm sure you are too.
Yeah.
But I mean, in terms of the movie, so as I was saying, I wasn't licking my lips to revisit it, but I actually thought I really enjoyed it, and the old bemoan is that, they don't make movies like that, but a big studio movie, period, that deals with big things and is intelligent, is well done with a deft touch. I think Ron Howard did a tremendous job, honestly. I mean, he won, and I don't totally have an issue with that. I think he he really did an excellent job. I thought Jennifer Connelly was phenomenal too, honestly.
She was, yeah.
I mean, really great. Why she's with John Nash is, I guess, a different story. I mean, I think the thing that I jumped out at me was like I think the movie did a lot of things very well, and it jumps a lot of time, obviously, which is always tricky, I think. But one thing that I think, the one thing that I bumped on early on, and this is not a huge flag, it's a movie, it can survive this, but is like, he's a pretty unlikable guy.
Yeah.
And then you got like Adam Goldberg and Anthony Rapp, basically being like, John Nash, we love him. Like, come get over here for a beer, John Nash. And it's like, he's a pretty unlikable, antisocial, dude. So, and then, they're all at his wedding, giving him big hugs and stuff like that. But, there were things that you can kind of nitpick and poke holes at. But I thought what also jumped out at me that I thought was really interesting was like, it started as one movie and morphed into a different.
How so?
It started out as an interesting biopic about this brilliant mind, basically, and about, his struggles finding success. And it sets up in the beginning how clearly he wants to get published and be recognized at Princeton and kind of just distinguish himself.
Right.
With this very unlikely love story with the single most beautiful woman in the world.
Yeah.
And then it totally changes into this government thriller. And then once you realize what is happening and the rug's pulled out with the Christopher Plummer scene, his first scene and everything, it turns into something else. So I think actually it's a movie that I wish I remembered how I felt when I saw it, but it probably really feels like if you know nothing about it going into it, if you showed somebody who had never heard of it, the movie, they would probably be taken on quite the ride, because I think it is a movie in 3 parts almost, with 3 different movies.
Sure.
And then also knowing now the whole, quote unquote twist with the Paul Bellamy character and everything, it's fun to rewatch it the way it's fun to rewatch The Sixth Sense and be like, look for the little clues along the way, how he's not interacting with anybody else, and how, there's that scene when he's, I think it might not be him, it's somebody else, but someone runs down the hall and John Nash runs after him, and then the Adam Goldberg character is like, John, what's going on? And they kind of foreshadow the fact that there's nobody in the hall that John's running after. But, little kind of Easter egg nuggets like that are fun to go back and watch. So I thought it rewarded the rewatch, actually.
That's the thing that surprised me, is that how early they reveal that he's seeing these people way earlier than I remember. It's not like The Sixth Sense where there's this big twist right at the end. I mean, it's like almost in the middle where Christopher Plummer's like, oh, well, have you ever met Paul? Have you ever, and she says, no, he wasn't at our wedding because he was traveling or whatever. And, so that was actually a nice surprise.
That's a little of a nit to pick on Jennifer Connelly's part. Is like, my husband has a best friend who I've never seen a photograph of, who wasn't at our wedding, who I've never heard my husband talk on the phone. But John and I forget his character's name, and Charles. John and Charles are best friends.
Oh, is it Charles?
Yeah, John and Charles are best friends. Really?
I think Jennifer Connelly's really great in this movie, and I think that the most affecting section is where we know he's schizophrenic and she's just caring for him.
Yeah. And
this is resonant, this is resonant to me for a lot of reasons. But she still looks absolutely stunning. I'm wondering if this was like a studio mandate of oh, this woman needs to look gorgeous. I didn't need her teeth falling out or anything, but I just felt like I feel like she's selling this turmoil so well in her performance, but she just looks so stunning. And I don't think I'm not reducing Jennifer Connelly to that, because I think she's really one of our great actors. But I just feel like the physical, because you see it on him. He's ashen, his hair is uncombed. You see the physical, so Russell Crowe does such a great job throughout this whole movie, just selling the physicality of this. Yeah. And she's no less of an actor, but I just bumped a little bit on, wait, why does she still look like she could just be on the red carpet, but for what she's wearing? Because the costuming, she's costumed appropriately. She's in a frumpy-ish stuff, but it's just if I were on that set, if I was, and again, I really think this had to be a conscious decision. I'm not at all saying that the makeup person or Connolly or Ron Howard, anybody dropped the ball. I think there was a studio directive. I'm wondering if there was a studio directive, I don't know, saying we need her to look as gorgeous as possible. And you've seen this in other movies, I rewatched, revisited Training Day for this,
just because also I fucking love watching Training Day, so bring it on. But, you know, one of the first shots of the movie, Ethan Hawke's getting out of bed at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
And like, I love Ethan Hawke. Ethan Hawke's the man. Ethan Hawke's a beautiful man, too. But he gets out of bed, like, not a single hair is out of his head.
Sure.
His hair is like coiffed perfectly.
No, this is.
I think it's just.
This is not unique to A Beautiful Mind. So I don't want it to look like I'm picking on A Beautiful Mind or Mademoiselle Connelly at all. It just jumped out at me because like I think it might speak to a larger issue I have with the movie. I won't say problem, is that like this movie's, you know, admirably pretty gritty and pretty unflinching, especially in its details. And it doesn't crumble under its own miserability, which is a problem I have with a lot of movies like this, sure. Where, you know, and I just feel like, yeah, it didn't take me out of the movie, but I just think her performance is so strong. I mean, I wrote down JC too glam in the hard times. But conversely or inversely, I really love her introduction. And this to me, I will bet dollars to donuts. This is not how they met. This is exactly the kind of liberty that every biopic makes. I remember I thought a lot about The Imitation Game watching this movie.
I thought about that too. Yeah.
Which is an excellent movie. But I remember when I saw The Imitation Game, when the Keira Knightley character is introduced, I remember walking out of that movie and saying to my wife, "I'll bet anything that is not how that went down." And then sure enough, I looked it up, or I read that like that character was already working with the Benedict Cumberbatch character, you know. But look, sure. that it's poetic license. I'm totally okay with it, but I just want to kind of call that out because it's, you know.
Yeah, I was not privy to this at the time, but then going back and reading about it, I saw that basically there was a lot of backlash against the movie for not portraying John Nash as he was, basically, for kind of rubbing off a lot of the hard edges of John Nash. I think he, not that this is a hard edge, but I think he was bisexual, and they totally kind of like took that out of the movie.
Sure.
You know, I think he was even more antisocial and tough hang than he was in the movie, and he's portrayed as a pretty tough hang. That's why I kind of joked about the Adam Goldberg character being like, "Get in here for a drink, Johnny boy," and it's like he's not a very likable guy. But you know, that stuff all in all never bothered me. I mean, like if he were a card carrying Nazi and they turned him into this, you know, sure, like that'd be an issue.
Like Lindbergh,
right? Yeah, yes, no, exactly. But you know, taking liberties in a biopic and making it as filmic and cinematic and a good story as possible, that stuff never bothered me.
It doesn't bother me. I just kind of wanted to call it out because people, you know, I don't know who's listening to this, but like if they're sort of younger people who are sort of learning about film, it's not incumbent upon me or you to be their teachers or anything. But but I do think it's interesting because Imitation Game was just a movie I kind of kept thinking about a lot because it's about a very antisocial person who's breaking codes. You know, in that case, that character's actually doing it. And I'm sure that this movie was a sort of lodestar for them in making that movie.
I'm sure they watched it when they were making it.
Yeah, and that's completely fine. Yeah. I mean, you and I are both writers, and we are influenced by things. That's all fine. But
steal from the best.
Steal from the best. Yeah, but I really just liked the way they introduced her. Like when she goes to the window, I thought that was you know, even though I think it's complete bullshit, it unto itself, it was a good scene. And I mean, you could argue that this is really as much her movie as it is his movie. Mm. And I think the movie does, you know, a pretty good job representing her. I was surprised by that because this wasn't something that was particularly the movies in the early 2000s were that great at. I mean, without her being the actual main character, I think this movie did a really good job of depicting her struggle because there's so many times where like the wife and girlfriend in one of these movies, regardless of the skill of the actors playing her, is so one note or so thinly drawn.
Yeah, it's like Adrian and Rocky. It's the classic sports girlfriend character.
Right, but Adrian and Rocky at least, I mean, Adrian and Rocky at least is an interesting character. Yeah, I mean, that's a fair comparison, but I think Adrian and Rocky at least has an arc, you know? Like, she goes from being, like, this one person, and then by the end, she's somebody else. But like, you know, that scene where she like trashes the bathroom and like sort of screams. I was like, wow, I don't know that a lot of movies would give the wife that scene.
Yeah.
You know, because I think they did a really good job. It's not quite a two-hander. It's definitely his movie, but I think pound for pound, she's in as much of this movie as he is.
Well, you can kind of feel it flip-flop too. I would argue that the beginning, the first half is, undeniably John Nash.
Well, until she shows up, for sure.
Right, yeah. And then even when she first shows up and they go to the ball and stuff like that, it's very kind of classic stuff. And she's great, and she's, has a certain presence to her that you kind of can't look away. Aside from just her, her beauty, I think she's a very like composed, poised person with this interesting like inner life that you kind of can't look away. But certainly like when she meets the plumber character, she takes much more of a charging hand in the movie. Yeah. So it kind of almost flip-flops, and as John gets kind of loonier and loonier, you kind of have a little bit less interest in him and more in her.
Yeah, I think it might seem like I don't know if it's a strange comparison. There was a movie that came out 5 years earlier called Shine, which Jeffrey Rush won the Oscar for.
Yeah, big Oscar movie.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw that. We don't have to litigate Shine. I found that movie, to be honest, very irritating, and I think Jeffrey Rush is a great actor.
Sure.
I hadn't seen anything before that, but I found the depiction of mental illness in that to be just fucking wearying. I haven't seen it since it came out, which is almost 30 years ago. And again, I think Jeffrey Rush is, one of our great actors.
Yeah. But he compared it to Simple Jack in Tropic Thunder.
Well, yeah, you know what? You brought it up. There is that thing of like, I could see someone making that case for this movie.
So this movie won. I think it wouldn't win today. I think it doesn't necessarily deserve to win today, but I think it's still a very good movie. I think the internet would like just tear this movie apart, like wrongly. I think wrongly.
Social media or Letterboxd now.
It would tear it apart.
I think social media would rip this a new one, first of all, because Jennifer Connelly, who's I can only assume Irish American, being cast as a minority, which again, I didn't even know that. Yeah. I guess she's Latina or something. I don't even know, but that just
would not fly today.
There's a couple things that I liked in the movie. I kind of want to just throw out. There's this bit where they're at the bar. It's early in the movie, and this attractive woman walks in. The blonde walks in with her two friends, and Nash is sort of illustrating why if they hit on their friends instead of all going for the blonde, they'll all end up doing better.
Right.
And I thought that was just really well
Adam
done.
Smith, right.
What's that?
Refuting Adam Smith wrong.
Exactly. And I thought that was like, I think there are a lot of visual touches in this movie that are really strong. And it's not a thing that I normally associate. We can talk about Ron Howard in a minute, but Ron Howard is one of these guys like Rob Reiner or Barry Levinson or Lawrence Kasdan, where like the first 10, 12 years of their career, every movie's different, like different genres. Like if you just look at Ron Howard's early movies, he does, I'm not gonna do the whole list here, but he does, Night Shift and then Splash and then Cocoon and then Gung Ho and then Willow and then Parenthood and then Backdraft, and then like Far and Away. And then, so it's like none of these movies are in the same genre, and he's just, and it's interesting because it's almost like Ron Howard is like this journeyman, but of course he's an A-list director.
You mentioned all those directors, and one like where I thought you were going with that was that they're all great directors of actors who are not the most visual directors imaginable.
I think that's true, though. Yeah,
and they like that. It's interesting that you lump those together, and I totally see where you're coming from. But it's like those were guys who I thought who they. Howard obviously being an actor himself, but they direct actors well. They seek out good stories. Some of them wrote, Kasdan, like some of them didn't.
Right.
Reiner being an actor himself too.
Yeah,
but they were kind of like. I say this in the best way because I like movies like this. So like meat and potatoes, 100%. I'm not going to do the Copacabana shot. I'm going to tell the story in a great way and have great performances. And I thought they told true stories, honest stories, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's I could not agree more. I think that they're not Scorsese, they're not De Palma, they're not Fincher later on. It's not going to be like, I think these movies are all their movies are really well photographed, often with like top tier DPs, but they're not they're not going to be doing the Copacabana scene from Goodfellas. But that said, there's a couple touches in this that I thought were really strong. Like there's a thing I wrote down where Nash is working at his window and they pull back and you see like a time lapse of the different seasons going by.
There's like a split diopter shot. Which, like in Vine, you mentioned De Palma, but like there's like that shot early on.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some. Yeah, he's definitely flexing his muscles.
Yeah.
And I think he also, it seemed like in the campaign, he went hard for this. Like he kind of saw the brass ring and he went for it and he kept it hard. And I don't begrudge him that at all. I think I love Ron Howard. Paranoid is like one of my 10 favorite movies. I love
Which one?
Paranoid is like one of my favorite movies ever.
Since we're on it, my favorite Ron Howard movie, it's really two, but one that I love, which is kind of got lost to time, is a movie he made called The Paper with Michael Keaton.
Sure. Yeah.
Which I think is, I really think that's his strongest movie. It's a David Koepp script, and I think he wrote it with his brother. I can't remember his brother's name. Sorry, David Koepp's brother. But I rewatched it maybe in the last year, and I think The Paper is like what Ron Howard does better than anybody else, or as good as anybody else. I think that movie's been a little bit lost to time. Yeah. And I also think maybe right behind or ahead of that, I think Apollo 13.
Yeah, Apollo 13 is amazing.
And it's funny, Apollo 13 is a movie that like I saw it when it came out 30 years ago, and I was like, yeah, that was good. And then I kind of dismissed it. And then I watched it 10, 12 years ago. It was on TV back when I still had cable, and I was flipping around. And I watched like 20, 30 minutes, and I was like, wow, this is really good. This is really strong. This is really taut. And I think that like, that is one of his more technical movies. I mean, like they're in space.
I thought Howard did a great job. He didn't get performances that were too over the top. The performances felt real, even when John Nash is going through these like schizophrenic breaks.
Sure.
I thought there were really nice flourishes that we talked about, the split diopter, or the kind of nice kind of floating shots as Jennifer Connelly's getting. I keep saying Jennifer Coolidge in my head. Jennifer Connelly is like coming out of
That'd be a much different movie. It'd be a lot of wow.
Yeah. Stifler's mom and John Nash. I think this is a big prestige kind of movie that is kind of, it is a relic of a different time. And I'm kind of nostalgic for that time because it's this. Yeah, I mean, it was an expensive movie. I didn't look at the budget, but it can't have been cheap. It was an expensive movie. It's a period movie. It feels like they're going for like a capital I important movie.
Sure.
And I'm okay with that because it's still entertaining at times, honestly. It's still entertaining in large spurts, I should say, not at times.
Another visual touch that I like, since we seem to be on that, is there's a scene which is pretty rough, intentionally, when Nash is getting electroshock treatment. I don't know if that's the right word. And and Jennifer Connelly and Christopher Plummer are sort of on a raised platform above, and she's sort of turned away, and you see in the background. And that just was an image that like just struck me as just like, awesome. Wow, that's a really like, and I thought that showed like, there's a lot of movies, and we're seeing a lot of them now where, I think I said this a few minutes ago, for me, a lot of these movies can crumble under the weight of their own miserability. Right. And I think this movie does a pretty good job. I feel like a lot of movies would be like in a tight close-up of him getting which could be effective. But I think the fact that like
Cuckoo's Nest shot.
Cuckoo's Nest, exactly. Yeah. I mean, a movie we'll cover on the show one day. Yeah. But yeah, I thought of Cuckoo's Nest, obviously, because obviously I had Best Picture on the brain because of this podcast I'm doing. But yeah, I think that like Ron Howard is like, okay, I'm showing you this horrible thing, but I can show it to you at a remove and you'll get it. Yeah. And I think that there's some directors, today who'll be like, no, man, you gotta see the drool coming out of his mouth, and you gotta see, and it's like, I get it. And I'm not a squeamish person, but I think this movie for the most part does a pretty solid job of keeping things engaging without crumbling over it. I keep using this word miserability. I think parts of this movie were tough, but it never got to like this point of like, how much longer, which frankly are things I'm going to be encountering as I move through these 97 movies.
That's there in movies too. I think also this movie does a good job, and this might be reflection of like that point in time, of the big studio involved, of DreamWorks, or just of Ron Howard himself. It does a good job at putting fucking movie stars in big roles.
Yeah.
Like Russell Crowe we talked about, and Jennifer Coolidge, as we talked about, Jennifer Connelly as we talked about.
Jennifer Coolidge needed to be in this movie. Yeah. Now I'm going to...
No, but like Ed Harris popped up, and Ed Harris he's had his Apollo 13 run. The Rock, he had a run at the point in time. Young me recognized Ed Harris. It's funny to reference it's funny. It was like a reunion of Dazed and Confused, one of my favorite movies of all time, between Anthony Rapp and Adam Goldberg.
I didn't make that connection.
Yeah, I mean, they're like friends in the movie.
Oh my God, I love that. I forgot that Rapp was in this. So when I saw that, I forgot that Goldberg was in it too. But that's so great.
Yeah,
you know,
I totally. I mean, Dazed is a movie I maybe up there with movies I've seen the most in my life.
No, I like Dazed and Confused also, but
it's
thank you for that. I totally did not. I did not twig that those two guys. Yeah, they're in the car together in Dazed and Confused.
They're their only friends in that movie.
A moment I really liked, just a line I liked. There's a couple lines of dialogue that really leapt out at me. Where Connolly says, "God must be a painter. Why else do we have so many colors?"
Sure.
I thought that line just really leapt out at me. I felt like I got really sort of wrapped up as I was supposed to, like in their first date, and I was sort of like shipping them in a way that maybe the movie doesn't quite earn. It was a lot of just like star power.
Yeah.
You know,
I liked I don't know if it was their first date. I guess it was, but you know, when he takes her outside and he points out the different shapes in the stars. It's cool.
Beautiful scene. I like that scene too. Cool. That's the thing. There was so many like moments in this that I was sort of like, oh, this is like really working for me.
Yeah.
You know, like this was like a nice surprise for a movie that I just remembered really kind of peripherally and yeah. So another line that I thought was just sort of funny, and again, we don't have to keep all this, is where Nash says, he's talking about the Pentagons, it's like they took the word classified out of the dictionary. I thought that was a really funny line. Yeah. But I thought that there was just like a lot of, you know, I thought that there was just so many moments in this that I was surprised worked. Another question for you, I guess, back to my window art question. Did this movie start the red string on the corkboard conspiracy, or was that a thing before?
Was that not in Usual Suspects?
There was no red string in Usual
Maybe
Suspects.
Not red string, yeah. Or Zodiac had that obviously after. I think Zodiac had that.
But Zodiac would have been after.
Sure.
But the red string thing, which like it's like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia joke. I mean, it's not fair to like try and hit you with a stat. I'm seeing this because I had a boss who used to say, "Oh, we're gonna beautiful mind this." And what he meant was just having like crazy like cutouts of everything. Yeah. So, you know, maybe this guy maybe this guy just incepted this idea in my head. But
I also, you know, talking about that, I wanted to shout out. I thought I was pretty moved by the score in this. I thought it was a little bit redundant, the kind of main theme, but I thought it did a really great job at kind of giving you this premonition early on that there's something off here, there's something heavy here.
Oh, interesting.
It was, like I said, it may have been a little repetitive and, you know, somewhat one note, but I thought it really fit the movie quite well. You know, there are these scenes when he's, you know, getting kind of abducted by the, you know, plumbers kind of guys or whatever, and people are gathering around him on campus and they're watching him.
Interesting that you're calling out the score. So the score was done by James Horner.
Sure.
Who was
Titanic,
a great,
right?
What's that?
Titanic?
He won an Oscar for Titanic. He did a lot. He did Aliens. He's done Glory. I mean, really he's deceased now, sadly, but yeah, one of those guys like who just scored all kinds of stuff, everything from like Braveheart, a ton of stuff for Ron Howard. I think he was Ron Howard's guy for a long time. Yeah. I know he did Apollo 13 and a lot of stuff. So yeah, James Horner, obviously an old pro. Interesting. Yeah. I think the score was effective. I don't know that I responded to it the same way that you did, but I love that you're calling that out. One thing I thought was actually really good, particularly because this movie's almost a quarter of a century old, and was made just a few years before we even knew what HD was. I thought the makeup in this movie was really strong. The old age makeup. I think that I wrote down good old age makeup on JC. I think, you know, at the very end, they aged her. She still looks beautiful, but I thought they did a really good job aging both of them. Yeah. Because I know that movies more recent than this, sometimes like the old age makeup, it's kind of like comical. Yeah. You know, they make them like sort of like prune people and I thought that the makeup really on the two of the actually all the actors that they kind of age up. I mean, Josh Lucas even, you know, they kind of recede his hairline a little bit. It's very subtle, like line their faces. I just thought that it was, you know, it was just very effective and I thought kind of sold it, because by the end of the movie, it ends like in like 1994. So we're, almost 50 years. It's almost 50 years. It's just shy of 50 years from the time we meet Nash to the end of the movie. Or I think maybe it's like 95 where he gets his 94, 95 when he gets his Nobel Prize. I think not the one thing, but I think one place where this movie kind of falls down for me, I'm curious if you bumped on this. I didn't quite understand what John Nash's significance was, meaning like at the end he gets the Nobel. I feel like they kind of yada yada'd that.
Yeah.
Was I just not paying attention, or?
No, I think it's going back also to that the scene with the blonde, which was cool. I mean, I think people who are familiar with John Nash's work would be like, this movie knows fucking nothing about John Nash's work, and I think to them I would say, I don't really care. Like, know, like the movie is not about John Nash's work. Like it's not, it's different from Turing in Imitation Game, and that like his work is like less important to what the movie is actually about. Like it's not a movie about here's this great man who accomplished these great things. So I think it's like very incidental to the movie. The argument in the blonde scene was like the Adam Smith idea. I don't know if you're going to keep this or not, but, the Adam Smith idea is like, if everybody each works for their own good, in general, it benefits like the greater society more. And he's like, no, if we each go for our own, or like if we work together, he says, we'll be able to achieve better things. I didn't really feel that reflected in the rest of the movie.
Right.
And it doesn't really matter to me. Like it's just like I said, it's just kind of incidental to the story they're trying to tell.
I would agree. I just feel like at the very end, they were trying to sell me on what he accomplished mathematically. Yeah. And that's Greek to me. And I would imagine to most people, I don't know what your mathematical background is.
Heavy, deep.
Have you published, John?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree with you that it's incidental to what the meat of the movie is. I just think that to end it at the Nobel Prize, I liked how he dedicated to his wife. I think emotionally that scene's working really well. Yeah. And I think, again, Crowe and Connolly play hell out of it. It just was sort of like, I don't even remember if this movie ends with like title cards. It may or may not. I do like the Nobel Prize scene because he does make it about his wife. I mean, they do a pretty good job of anchoring this movie in a relationship.
Yeah.
And I think that works. This won Best Picture, obviously, is why we're talking about it.
Yeah.
Why do you think it won? We're not going to litigate what it's up against. We'll get to that in a second. But why do you think this movie won? Was it pure merit? Was it politics? Was it some sort of makeup award? None of the above? Like, what is your take on why Beautiful Mind wins Best Picture?
I think it felt like a big, important movie. And I think it had a lot of people at the, to use with Bill Simmons, kind of at the apex of their career. You could argue this is apex Russell Crowe. You could argue that this is Ron Howard right around that time. Jennifer Connelly wins an Oscar. Like, it's a big, important movie. It's probably close to the apex of DreamWorks, like right around then.
Yeah, I think that's probably true.
So, like, why do I think it won? I think it's a movie that screams the kind of movie that wins in 2001. It's a story about an important man, an important period, like point in time in history, dealing with a difficult subject matter. You could literally put air quotes around all these things. A difficult subject matter, an important man, a consequential period of time with, as I said before, you just chock full of huge fucking stars throughout. So like I totally get why it won.
Categorically denied. Before we get to Best Picture, let's see if A Beautiful Mind was worthy of the other 3 Oscars that it won. So John, Ron Howard wins Best Director. He's nominated against Ridley Scott for Black Hawk Down, David Lynch for Mulholland Drive, Robert Altman for Gosford Park, and Peter Jackson for Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. So
Murderer's Row.
Murderer's Row. So given that, you spoke very highly of Ron Howard here. Do you think against those other 4 directors, do you still give Ron Howard the Best Director Oscar?
I think history has been obviously very kind to Mulholland and Lynch, of course. Mm-hmm. I think Mulholland's amazing. I've never been as much of a Lynch fan as other people. I think he's incredible and a true one of one and all that stuff. He's pretty far outside the bounds of the Academy and what they kind of like to recognize. Hindsight's tough here because Peter Jackson obviously was crowned in a big way, and we can get into the whole like Lord of the Rings of it, but they were crowned at the end of the trilogy, the way people think Dune might be crowned at the end of the
sure. It's a comparison, yeah.
Ridley won for Gladiator?
No, he did not. It's so funny. He did not win. And my last guess, thought Ridley Scott won for this year. Ridley does not win. Soderbergh wins for Traffic. Ridley has never won.
Tough to. Yeah. Okay. Well, Ridley. Would I give it to him for Black Hawk? I really like Black Hawk Down. It's pretty as realistic as a movie can get. A movie that I think the U.S. government also got behind. They donated like warplanes for that movie. Actually,
did they really?
Yeah, because there's a point in time, and then goes back to the Raftery podcast, but it goes back to like at a point in time when people were, the U.S. government, I think, wanted a way to drudge up support for, the U.S. military, basically. So they were giving money to it and to the movie, but that's kind of a digression. You might cut that.
Digressions are fine on the show.
No, I mean, I would say personally, I would still give the nod to Ron Howard, maybe almost as a makeup, the way I think Cuarón won for Roma but didn't win for Best Picture. I think he deserved to win at some point. Mm-hmm. And when you look back at his career, this is probably the best shot that he got to win. Peter Jackson totally deserves and won at a different point in time. David Lynch, a titan, but is he the Academy's bread and butter? I'm not so sure.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, that's a long way of rambling and saying I have no problems with him winning it still. I really don't.
Yeah, this is interesting for me because I don't have the stat at my fingertips. I can't remember since, and this is off the top of my head. I can't remember another year where two directors were nominated without their movies being nominated. Right. Now with 10 nominees, it just doesn't happen anymore because you've got 5 directors and 10 movies, up to 10 movies. So I'm not at all going to say this has never happened before, but I remember at the time thinking like, wow, this is really interesting that like there's 2 guys nominated without their movies nominated. For me, I prefer Ridley Scott. I'm not a big Lynch guy either, like you, but Mulholland Drive was interesting because I saw it. I'll be brief about this. I saw Mulholland Drive on video early 2002, and I kind of was just like, okay, this movie's not going to make sense. I'm going to kind of give myself over to it, not going to be so literal. And I kind of dug it more than almost any other movie that he's made, with the exception maybe Elephant Man, which is like not typical of him in some ways. So I would say Scott and Lynch, I'm a little more taken with than what Ron Howard did, even though I thought Ron Howard did a good job here. So let's move on to Best Supporting Actress. So Jennifer Connelly wins. She beats Helen Mirren for Gosford Park, Maggie Smith for Gosford Park, Marissa Tomei for In the Bedroom, and Kate Winslet for Iris. So against those 4 women, does Connelly deserve to win? What do you think?
I didn't revisit Iris. I don't know about you.
No. You don't. By the way, you don't have to have seen all of these nominees. Just of what you've seen.
No, I thought Connelly was like one of the high points in the movie, and I thought totally deserved it. She's an incredible actress with an amazing career. Of course, they say Oscars are not necessarily career like reflective of a career at large. I think they sort of are at times, and I think she's incredible and she's amazing in the movie. And to your point earlier, I think she carries a lot of the movie. So no, I think she totally deserved to win in my mind.
I completely agree. And I think Best Supporting Actress is really an award. I won't call her an ingenue because she'd already been in like Labyrinth 15 years earlier, and she's 30 years old here. I think that it's interesting. I have not seen Iris, but I have seen Gosford Park and In the Bedroom. I think Marissa Tomei is terrific in The Bedroom, and I'm a huge fan of hers. But yeah, I think Jennifer Connelly deserved this award, and I think it's stronger than I remember. Yeah, and she was, I think, possibly the best thing about this movie. As strong as Crow is, that's debatable. But yeah, I agree. So Jennifer Connelly, you get to keep your Oscar. Last award that it won was Best Adapted Screenplay. It is against Ghost World, In the Bedroom, Lord of the Rings, and Shrek. So against those 4, what do you think?
The screenplay actually didn't jump out at me. I keep coming back, but it's those forced moments of like the guys at the bar gathering, and like I was like, these guys are not friends. Like they're not like, oh, John Nash is here, get him over here. Like I keep coming back to that, but that's like a real thing. Someone mentioned that recently, that maybe it was Good Will Hunting. Like when you saw those guys on screen, you could just tell that they were friends. Like you bought that they'd be hanging out at the bar together
in real life.
Yeah. Like this movie like didn't do that, and I guess to the it's probably the fault of the screenwriter in that sense. Look, you don't lose your Oscar for that. I None of the others jumped out at me, to be totally honest. Do they for you? The other nominees?
No, I mean, I've cited a lot of
Ghost World. I do love Ghost World.
I have not seen Ghost World, and I feel like if I had, that might be where I would throw this.
Yeah.
I wrote down, I think a lot of the dialogue in this movie is very strong. I wrote down one thing that I bumped on when she said, I need to believe something extraordinary is possible. That really clunked for me. That was one of the few moments where I was just like, okay. I mean, it's one line, and that's not a diss on Connolly. I think, sometimes even the best actors are just given something, I believed her emotion in it. I just thought the line didn't work.
I do think, though, as you and I being screenwriters, I think, screenwriting is more than just, a clunky bar scene or, like lines of dialogue that sail or sink. I think, getting back to what we were saying earlier, I think structuring the movie like how it is, which is totally the screenwriter's kind of, work, starting off as a prestige biopic, getting in for a short period of time to a, tense, kind of spy thriller. That's obviously, 20 minutes of the movie, and then shifting into this relationship drama with this kind of unraveling of a great man. I thought that was he took on a lot, structured it well, Akiva, and I think he did a good job, and with no one jumping out at me from that list.
So, John, is this a problem without a solution? Now it's time to test our hindsight with the verdict. Against Gosford Park, In the Bedroom, Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, and Moulin Rouge, was A Beautiful Mind the best movie nominated this year?
Yeah, to me, of those 5 nominated movies, it's the best. Simple as that.
Yeah, you know what? I agree. And I think that's it. And I've actually seen all 5 of these movies. I'm not current on them, but I saw 3 of these when they came out. No, I saw 2 of these. I saw Gosford Park and In the Bedroom in theaters. I saw Lord of the Rings and Moulin Rouge in the year subsequent to that on video, actually with A Beautiful Mind. And yeah, I can say with total confidence of these 5, A Beautiful Mind is the best of these movies that it was nominated against for Best Picture. So let's appeal. John, was A Beautiful Mind the best movie of 2001, period?
It was not.
Okay.
It was not. The best movie of the year was Amélie.
Oh.
I knew you weren't going to expect that. Or maybe you would have, actually.
Well, John has a French wife and is fluent in French, so I didn't predict that, but...
maybe you should have, though, right?
No. We'll talk about it.
Yeah, it's a movie. Look, I am a little biased, obviously, with a French wife, and that really is the movie that actually came out when I met my wife. So
is it really?
Yeah. So we saw that movie in theaters in Philadelphia when it came out, because it was the only French movie playing that we could see together, that she could kind of go and get a little taste of home, and it happened to be, I think, the best movie of the year, actually. We just kind of stumbled into this French movie playing at this tiny movie theater at the Ritz in Philly. Shout out the Ritz, shout out Philly. I think Amélie is really a perfect movie. I mean, and I think, would it win? Is it likely that it wins? Parasite wins and it changes the kind of, discourse. The Academy is much more international, weighted now. So, but that interests me less. Like, would it win today? Would it have a chance at winning? It's the movie that I think is the best movie of the year. I think it's visually absolutely stunning. I think it's the hands down best score of the year. Mm-hmm. It's an incredible score for people who don't know it. Jan Tiersen, just a wonderful, wonderful score. And it creates this, it literally looks like an Instagram picture of Paris before Instagram came out, this like sepia tone movie. It's visually beautiful. And it's a love story in this French way without being saccharine. It's a movie about this woman who starts out kind of wanting to fix the lives of other people and ends up realizing she has to fix her own life, which is kind of a mess. And it's got these incredible lived-in details. The movie starts out by being like, Amélie likes 5 things and then doesn't like 5 things. And they're the most specific things. And I still remember what they all are. And it's when they introduce you, Amélie's father likes 5 things and doesn't like. And it's a very whimsical, realistic or whatever way of, like introing a character. It's voiceover, it's quick shots. It's so creative. It's so well observed. It still holds up. It's a perfect movie, and it's the best movie of the year.
All right. Good choice. I like that. My choice is Memento.
Yeah, I mean, you cannot fucking go wrong there, man.
This is the last, for me, this is the last great independent movie for more than a decade.
Yeah.
This is the last time that a director comes out of Sundance and evolves into something big, but Nolan becomes something even bigger than QT or Soderbergh. I mean, Nolan is on a Kubrick, is on a Kubrick Spielberg level. But to me, this is like this is like Reservoir Dogs or The Killing. It's a little movie. It's a reputation maker, but it's like stands really high among the strongest things this director has ever done. And I feel like if this were even just a couple years earlier, if this were the 90s, it is nominated for screenplay, I'm happy to say. I think it would have won screenplay. And I think that Guy Pearce would have maybe gotten nominated for an Academy Award. So keeping this Ed Exley, Bud White theme going. I rewatched it in preparation for this. I hadn't seen it in a long time. And for me, I've always liked it, but I hadn't seen it in a really long time. And I revisited it, and I'm generally, pretty high on Nolan.
Yeah.
I don't like every single movie, but I think he's great. And, I really wish he would just go back to, he literally said, why would I make a movie on a small scale when I can have hundreds of millions of dollars? To his credit. I don't think he was being egotistical. He was just being very practical. Like, why would I make I could work at this high level. Why wouldn't I do that?
Why stay at a hostel when I can stay at the Ritz?
Exactly. And that's fine. I didn't find it egotistical. I think he was being very honest. And I think Tarantino would say the exact same thing. But those guys aren't like Soderbergh, where they're going to do a small thing and just experiment. But yeah, I just think Memento, I opened this podcast like I did last week by saying how the 2000s were for me a very slack decade. And I think Memento sort of wrote this check that for me wasn't cashed. I really thought this is this cool, inventive indie. I think Nolan delivered on the promise of Memento, but I think the movie industry, for the most part, didn't, at least in the 2000s. Yeah. And this is again, sort of something I'm interrogating over the course of this sort of first season. We'll look back at all these movies in this whole decade, and maybe I'll come out saying, this decade was stronger than I remember, which is why I love your recommendation. I'll admit I have not seen Amelie. I know the movie. I haven't seen it. It's not that I've avoided it. So you're definitely inspiring me to go take a look. If I ever have time, I will go do that. All right, John, our next category is Spotlight. This is where we spotlight something from any movie, like a performance, cinematography, score, a stunt sequence, or whatever aspect that popped for us and should have been nominated this year.
I think the cinematography from In the Mood for Love is really hard to shit on, honestly. It's hard to get away from that. It's a beautiful movie. I'm not super well versed in Wong Kar-wai's films, honestly, but I've seen that. Yeah. And we studied it in film school for a DP class. We kind of tried to reconstruct the shots. We failed miserably, as you might expect. But it's like, the whole every photo, every scene, I should say, every still looks like a photograph.
I've seen that movie, and I agree. It is a gorgeous movie.
Gorgeous movie. Look, I wanted to get there on this when we first started talking about this movie year for this podcast.
Right.
And the first thing that jumped in my head was Training Day has got to win Best Picture.
Right.
And then I went back and watched it for this podcast. And in the end, it's a little rough around the edges. It's not quite like a French Connection level kind of cop movie, although it does deal with some big themes.
Yeah.
But man, Denzel.
Yeah.
Denzel's maybe pound for pound my favorite actor.
Yeah.
And this is maybe pound for pound my favorite performance by him. It was like the buzzsaw to end all buzzsaws. What I said earlier about Crow, I thought was really great, but it's you weren't going to beat this guy.
Right.
Denzel, it's one of the most magnetic performances. I couldn't stop watching him. And again, I think he's the most charismatic guy, one of the most gifted actors, just unbelievable. This is Denzel at his Denzelist. Mm-hmm. And I could have watched 10 hours of Alonzo in Training Day. And the movie itself to me is very good, does not quite get there. I would never pitch it as a Best Picture thing here, although that was my first idea. Sure. But holy shit, man, Denzel, it's an unbelievable performance, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. I read that script 2 years before the movie came out, and I think at the time, I don't know if he was attached, or I think somebody had said like, oh, it's going to be Samuel L. Jackson and maybe like Matt Damon. And I read the script and really liked it. And then 2 years later, I saw the trailer, and I was like, as the trailer was unfolding, I was like, wait, I know this story. Yeah. And I was like, wait, they got Denzel to do this? Like, holy shit. Yeah, again, like we were saying about Beautiful Mind, the fact that a big studio make that. Training Day is something you would see on Netflix and it'd be at like 70% of its strength. So my spotlight is for the screenplay of a movie called Heist, written by David Mamet, written and directed by David Mamet. Do you know this movie, John?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so the knock on David Mamet is that real people don't talk this way. And my response to that is to quote Heist, put it to music. I think this is his most stylized and insane dialogue, but almost every line in this movie just crushes. And even when the story kind of fumbles in the last scene, which it does for me, the dialogue, even in that last scene, is still just so strong. And what's interesting about Heist is that like he has his most Hollywood cast. He's got Gene Hackman, only 3 or 4 movies from the end of his career. He's got Danny DeVito. He's got a really young Sam Rockwell. He's got Delroy Lindo, who was starting to be in kind of like more Hollywood stuff. And if you think about, you know, the Hollywood movies those guys have been in and the generic shit they've had to say and the relish they must have felt of getting to say, I mean, there's so many quotable lines. I could just sit here and quote Heist lines and the podcast would just go on and on and on. And, you know, I also think that this is the best that Rebecca Pidgeon, who's Mamet's wife, gets to be in any movie. Okay. I think that like this is the best use of her. He gave her a lot of really versatile roles, and I think that she kind of works in like sort of like this tough dame role. And I think Heist is a movie you should check out. But again, the dialogue in this movie is just so fucking nuts.
Crackles,
but it's just so. But again, people will say like, well, people don't talk that way. It's like you're just missing the point. Yeah. There's no pretense that these are like how real people would talk. This movie is just so much fun.
Totally.
And I mean, I'm sort of being a little sneaky. I think the movies we're checking out, but I just want to focus on the screenplay in particular. I also think as a director, you know, this and Spartan were like big studio Mamet, and I think that was really fun while it lasted. You know, like Mamet movies that like were made by Warner Brothers. Maybe they didn't have the hugest budget, but we had like these mid-budget movies in the early 2000s. So like they have like, you know, like really strong production values. So it really only lasted 2 movies, but it was fun while it lasted.
You know, to your point about verisimilitude to, you know, how people really talk in real life. It's the same thing we were saying about John Nash earlier, you know, how it's not totally real. It's like, if you want the real thing, go watch a documentary, you know, go read Wikipedia. I mean, you know, to me, like, you know, Tarantino never did that, you know, like, you know, like, and that's kind of part of the reason you go to the movies is to be entertained, take it on a ride. I mean, look, there's a lane for the other avenue of that. There's a lane for the other, you know, side of that, which is, you know, having people talk as real to life as possible. And that's cool. But, you know, that knock on people, especially someone as writerly as Mamet, if you're being taken on a ride by the dialogue, who cares if it's how people talk in real life? You're being entertained.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, I think with Tarantino, people are more inclined to sort of, when they buy that ticket, they know what they're getting with him. Sure. I think Mamet might not be as strong a brand with people because I think as a name, he's not as strong. For sure not. Yeah. Because I think people don't know what David Mamet looks like, whereas Tarantino, you know, obviously is a more famous face.
He put himself in his movies.
Exactly. Mamet never put himself in his movies, even in a cameo. So John, we have hindsighted A Beautiful Mind. Thank you very much. That was a really great chat. I think you will probably be the guest who I'll have back the most. Just
you know where to find me, buddy.
Yeah.
Great.
So that was really great. Thank you so much for coming. Next episode, Brian Coppell and I will be discussing the best picture of 2002, Chicago. Till then, looking forward to looking back.